Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to the Immortal Bloom channel. I'm one of the artists with Immortal Bloom, and today we're going to look at how to do some simple sewing techniques. All you need is a thimble. I've got a silicone plastic thimble. It's pretty cheap. You can get them in any haberdashery. As well, you need some thread scissors, a size 8 needle, which is a larger eye of the needle, or if you have low vision, we have a self-threading needle, which makes things so much easier. So we're just going to get your thread, and we're going to measure out about half a meter. Now I would recommend using good solid cotton thread, as it is a higher quality and it's less fibrous, and so it makes it less likely to snap when you're sewing. So I'm just going to snip that off. I'm going to get my self-threading needle. There are different styles of self-threading needles. They usually come with a side lip, which makes it easier just to then hook your thread around and then slot it in at the side. But for this one in particular, it has an open end at the eye at the very top. Problem is, my hands are slippy. There we go. It just pops in, and it's actually quite tough. It doesn't come out. So you want to double over your thread once you've got your thread in the eye. Preferably the same length, like so. So both ends touching the same length as each other. Now, if you have low vision, it is good to just give it a little tug. Once we've done that, you want to loop your thread around your index finger, pass your needle in through that loop, which makes an overhand knot, and then you're going to do it again, which then makes a surgical knot, or a surgeon's knot. This just makes sure that whenever you're actually come to sewing, it then doesn't come all the way through again, so it stops your thread from slipping. Once you've done that, get your sample piece of material. Now, you don't necessarily have to use a sample piece of material. These stitches do work on basic mending, so if you have any tears, or if you have any holes in your socks, these sort of stitches will make it really easy just to mend it back up again. But for today, I'm just going to use a black piece of fabric just for you guys to get a hang of. So I've cut out a piece of fabric. I'm just going to double it over, making both edges meet each other, like so. You want to make sure that these edges do match each other, as this is called your seam line. And I'm just going to stick a little pin in. You want to match your corners up as best as you can, and as neatly as you can, and then by putting your pin in about a centimetre in, pass it through your material perpendicular to your seam line, and you do that on both ends. Ooh. So this then will keep your edge matching each other. Okay, so once you've got your edges pinned together, we're going to now start in with our first stitch, which is the running stitch. Running stitch is really, really good for if you want to create nice, neat little seam lines. You can go as small as you want to as big as you want. And so for today, we're just going to go with a big, long stitch so you guys at home can have a look. How you would describe a running stitch is like a wave motion going in and out, and hopefully in a straight line. Now, for your first try, that might not be so simple, and it's okay to fail at that. It took me a good couple of years to properly get to grips with hand sewing, so take your time when doing these at home. When you have your sample, you want to pick it up. If you're right-handed, you want to pick it up in your left pinch down with your thumb and index finger just at the right edge, about half a centimetre to a centimetre in from your seam line. Now obviously if you are left-handed, then these are in reverse. We're just going to start with getting our needle about half a centimetre to a centimetre in. Stick your needle from the bottom up and it comes through, and remember that little knot you made at the start, it stops it from coming through completely, so that's really, really good. And it's always good to then re-put it through to secure it a couple of times, so it creates this very small invisible stitch. And once you started that, then you can start making your stitch lines. So about a centimetre across, I'm just going to move my thumb and index finger, and this time you are going in with your needle from the top down. I'm doing this nice and big so that you at home can see this while I go along. Now you've made your top stitch. This is your top stitch as it is the longer stitch. When it comes to your bottom layer, you want to make the length between the two holes a slightly bit shorter, as this is your bottom stitch. So I'm just going to put it in there. And again, just gauge about a centimetre with my thumb and index finger and try and keep within a straight line. Now that we've had our second stitch, if you're having any problems with your thumb getting in the way, this is where your thimble comes in handy. So we're just going to pop that on. The only thing is with thimbles is that it does stop sensation, so it can make things a bit more difficult when you're trying to feel where the needle is coming through, especially from the bottom to bottom up. But again, this is just a practice run. It's just really for you at home to just have an experiment. So going up again, and sometimes it can be easier to hold it so that it's going away from you, as it can help the direction of the stitch to be a bit more straighter. So I've just swapped it, and I'm going to go back through from the top down. Just every so often double check that your smaller stitches are in line. And you're basically going to repeat this all the way down until you have sewn along your seam line or your tear. Now that we're coming to the end of the edge, we want to then, at the left hand corner, about half a centimetre to a centimetre in, just want to then come back up through and as close as you can towards that thread coming through the material, go back through so you can create a loop. Use your thumb to make sure that you don't pull it all the way through till about there, and again, seeing that where that's come through, you just want to then stick your needle up through the middle of that loop around again with your needle, and then again just secure it. And then to finish off, stick your needle back through that so that when you cut away your thread, it's left on this bottom side so it doesn't interfere with your top stitch. And you just snip away those and you should be left with a neat straight edge. That is the first stitch, which is the running stitch, and we're just going to go on to the whipping stitch. Okay, and now we're just going to go on to our second stitch, which is called the whipping stitch. The whipping stitch is like a spiral round motion when you're stitching. It's really quick and easy to do. It's usually used to do some quick mending with. It saved my life a few times, so I tend to find it a favourite. This time around, I'm going to use a normal needle, which has a size 8 head, which is quite a large eye, and when you're a beginner it's advisable to use between a size 8 to size 12, as it can be thicker to use as well, and easier to handle. So we're just going to go on to an example of a tear which you can mend. So if you have a pair of jeans or a hole in your sock, this is a pair of cargo pants. The material is usually cotton and poly mix. As you can see, this is quite a handsome tear. So whoever wore these must have had a lot of metal things in their pocket, or some sort of thing rubbing away in their back pocket. Yeah, so you want to get your left hand, if you're right-handed, I'm just going to stick it into the pocket. You want to try and use your hand as the surface, as the hard surface to bounce the needle up off, so that it keeps your thread nice and taut. And again, you just want to start now. When you've got a tear like this, when it has all these fibers coming off, you really want to start at just before the tear even begins, so that you can secure your stitch first and foremost. And that is just going, it also means that any sort of loose fibers, then your stitch is then catching in between, and that means then it won't come away. So I've done that a few times, as you can see. So the whipping stitch, you can keep as loose as possible, but the looser it is, the more likely it will come undone again. So it's best to keep your whipping stitch a very tight stitch. And so we're just going to whip, starting from the edge, going across, like so. You will find as well that on one side that maybe there might be more fibers coming away. So when you stick your needle in on each side, you want to make sure that there's your needle, just tug on your needle a bit so that there is no give. This means that secure threads within the fiber have then locked onto your needle. So already it's starting to then bring these together. This is a quick fix stitch. My thread has been mixing in with these fibers that have been coming away from the actual material itself. Now, to make things slightly easier, you want to cut away these fibers. So I'm just going to try and make them as tight as possible to the thread, or to the material, so then it makes sewing less confusing. Once you've cut your fibers away, make sure anything loose just comes away. Oh, I'm just going to have to take my glasses off because I'm not that short-sighted. And you want to just keep repeating this, keeping it nice and tight as possible. Now what I've done is, because of how fibrous this material has gotten at the tear, I've just literally just snipped away as much as possible, so you're giving it like a neater edge. It makes things a lot easier when you're sewing it together, so that your needle and thread doesn't get mixed up with fibres it doesn't need to get mixed up with. Now if you're doing this on clothes that you've got at home, it is always good practice to get thread matching the same colour as the material. So for this I would use a navy thread, not bright colours. I've got maybe 2-3 stitches left, and again you want to end your last stitch just before the actual tear line starts, and you want to, once you've got to that bit, you want to loop through, keeping your thumb to keep the loop secure, go through for an overhand knot and again for a surgeon's knot, and then you just should pull through like so, and then snip as close as you can to that wee knot and snip away any other threads, and then as you see, that is your weaving stitch. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for joining us in our introduction to sewing. We will be continuing on these stitches for the next workshop, which I will be holding, and it's called the Miniature Eden Project. We will be looking at PET plastics, so bring them to our next workshop and we will learn how to make greenhouses out of them.